Hi, I'm Nadina, and in this video I'm going to talk about the type of mindset that leads a narcissist to stalk. Narcissists are notorious stalkers, particularly those that are at the malignant end of the spectrum. They use it as a weapon to retain power and control over the victim, whilst also intimidating them and creating fear in them. So this video is going to focus specifically on narcissistic ex-partners and the methods that they use to retain power and control over you after you've left them. So stalking is defined as a pattern of persistent and unwanted attention. It usually manifests in the form of either being followed around secretly or sometimes even very openly, and it's usually accompanied by threats, spying on you, and being given unwanted gifts, especially those of a sexual nature. And it can be accompanied by harassment at your workplace. They might just show up there unexpectedly, damaging your property, sometimes harming your pets, sabotaging any kind of romantic dates that you go on, or it could even just be like general harassment. Maybe they're phoning you endlessly all throughout the night to try and stress you out and break your sleep patterns. It's ultimately, it just culminates in restricting the freedom of the victim, to the point where the victim no longer feels safe to go out alone or to be at home alone even. There's this common misconception that stalkers are these like weird male loner types that target unknown women, but actually most stalkers are already known to the victim. And although it's a lot less common, men can actually be on the receiving end of this type of harassment too. It's estimated that something like 1 in 6 women and I think 1 in 19 men will experience being stalked or some form of severe harassment at some point in their lives. Usually the victim's stalked by an ex-partner. There is a strong link between stalking and both physical and sexual violence. So it's not something to be taken lightly or dismissed as insignificant, which is often the case in the initial stages of the harassment. People don't really see it for what it is and they underestimate it. So therefore or they fear not even being believed. So there's less likelihood of them reporting it in the initial stages. In up to 40% of domestic murder cases, the victim had actually been stalked prior to their murder. And although women can stalk too, it does tend to be more men that do so. And they can be of any age, race, gender, social class. It's right across the board. However, they do typically tend to be middle-aged, either unemployed or underemployed. Basically, they're people with a lot of free time on their hands. People that have no real drive or purpose going on at that given point in time, which is what encourages the behavior in them. Somebody who has a busy, purpose-driven life, they wouldn't waste their precious time and energy by carrying out these things or channeling their energy in such a negative way. They'd be too busy focusing on building the positive in their life rather than choosing to wallow in hate and destructive behavior towards an ex. The narcissist that stalks is typically of very high intelligence. This is a very well thought out game on their behalf. And it's designed to instill fear and have dominance over you. It's estimated that up to 50% of stalkers have personality disorders, if you didn't already suspect that, right? Anyone who's been through this can attest that it has a deeply damaging effect on the victim. It creates a mindset of deep fear and hypervigilance in the person that can be incredibly hard to overcome, if ever. If the victim wasn't already hypervigilant, say, to prior abuse or something similar, well, they certainly will be now. It keeps you on edge and it makes you look over your shoulder constantly. You can never really relax because you know that person could turn up at any time or place with malintent on their mind. Also, it's worth noting that victims of stalking that are trauma bonded to their ex-partner can actually find it hard to recognize that what the perpetrator is doing is actually stalking. There can kind of be a tendency to play down their actions and, maybe dismiss them as impulsivity or immaturity, or, you think, oh, maybe they're just missing me or finding it hard to move on after the relationship's ended. But it's almost like a type of refusal on behalf of the victim to accept the predicament that they're really in. And perhaps after being gaslit for such a long time, the victim no longer has any belief in themselves or their own perceptions, and they don't recognize the stalking for the dangerous act that it is. It's kind of like a case of the abuse of a relationship is now over, but yet the abuse still continues. And for those of you who are still trauma bonded to your ex-partner, remember that stalking is a criminal offense, and most people don't actually report it until around the 100th incident. Be aware that often they can begin stalking you from the very first meeting without you even realizing it. They might start turning up at the same places as you to build rapport with you and give you the impression that both of you are in the same circles or frequent the same type of venues. This is completely planned and premeditated. They have deliberately targeted you because they see in you something that they want or they recognize as a source of good supply. If they have access to your home, then they'll get copies made of your keys without your knowledge. They'll go in there when you're not home without letting you know so that they can snoop and go through your stuff. They have been known to install spyware on people's devices. They'll drive by your home at nighttime to see if you're there or not. If they can't get to you physically, then they'll direct their searches to your social media. But if you have everything private and they can't access anything, then they'll even go as far as going to your friend's social media in the hope of maybe seeing some photos or some kind of info that your friends might post about you. They will literally leave no stone unturned when it comes to finding out about you. So why is the number one question of anyone who's been through this, right? Well, primarily it's a game to them first and foremost. The narcissist gets a high of seeing you in fear of them and knowing that despite you leaving them, they can still have an effect on your life and the ability to control you, even though it's now from a distance. Narcissists suffer from pathological jealousy in absolutely every aspect of their lives, but it's even more evident when it comes to their partner. They can't stand the fact that you took the decision to end the relationship. In their narcissistic minds, they're the only ones that are allowed to make that decision, not you. And it ultimately creates a narcissistic injury in them. And anyone that knows a narcissist knows that they're always hell-bent on revenge. So this is just one more way of doing that against you. In essence, they're obsessed with hating you. They develop a fixation on the victim, which in turn becomes a toxic obsession. They don't want you to move on with your life, and this is their way of reminding you that you can't get rid of them. By nature, they're vindictive and they want to punish you. You leaving them gave them narcissistic injury, and now they want to punish you for that perceived insult. That's essentially what it boils down to. It's a form of punishment for what they perceive as a personal injury or insult. Remember that narcissists don't have the ability to see things from other people's perspectives. They only see their own perspective. So to them, it doesn't really matter how they treated you in the relationship or all the bad things they done. All they see is that you left them, and this makes you public enemy number one in their eyes. You've also got to consider that narcissists in general feel extremely entitled. And that entitlement then transfers over to their stalking behaviors too. They feel entitled to know about your life, what you're up to now. They see you as a possession. And even though the relationship is over, they still feel entitled to be part of your life. And even if that means resorting to stalking in order to do so, they don't live by the same rules as regular folk. In their mind, everything they do is justified. They see it as fair game. They feel vindicated in their behavior. They want to devalue you and dehumanize you, which in their mind justifies the harassment. Narcissists are typically known for holding grudges, hence why their stalking can last years, decades, sometimes even a lifetime. They tend to resurface periodically over the course of years, and just because they're inactive now doesn't mean that they're actually gone. They can and do pop back up again at different points in time. It's the nature of their sickness. They need that hit of constant supply from somewhere, and you were once very good supply to them, and they'll always remember that. Even when they're in a new relationship, they still continue to stalk, because this is not about love or longing for a past lover. It's a game of psychological warfare. They may be stalking or harassing multiple people, not just you. Often they have multiple sources of supply to extract from. When you were with them, it's quite possible that they were also stalking the ex prior to you. They know the damage that they're inflicting on you, and the sadistic part of them wants to see the fruit of their work, basically. They want to see how much destruction they've caused in your life. Narcissists are deluded, and they consider themselves as almighty powerful. They want to see confirmation that you're still suffering afterwards because of them. It reinforces that sense of power and supply in them, essentially. Really what they want is to see you shrink as a person and for your world to become so small and constrained. And essentially, they want to destroy your happiness. If you're dealing with a covert narcissist that's stalking you, it's quite probable that they're actually going to accuse you of stalking them. They do this to get support from the people around them, so that when you finally do muster up the courage to start speaking up and telling people the truth, no one's actually going to believe you. Remember, the narcissist is the master of the smear campaign. So they've probably already been destroying your name in the background for quite a long time in advance of this moment. They know how things are going to end. They've seen this dynamic play out a million times in every relationship they've ever had. So they know from day one that it's going nowhere ultimately. They know that eventually you're going to get fed up and tired of the abuse and their behavior, and that you're going to leave. So they set all this up in anticipation of that, and basically destroy your name and your character, so that when the time comes and they're stalking you, people believe the opposite. They actually think that you're the one that's stalking them. So what can you do about this, right? Okay, so you need to report it to the police as early as possible, and you need to tell everyone around you what's happening. The more people that know, the better, and especially if you're dealing with a covert narcissist, because the narcissist is counting on the fact that you're going to shrink and be too afraid to speak up. You know your truth, so keep speaking it. If you don't speak up early on, it's actually going to go on for much longer than what it should have. And the more the narcissist gets away with it, the more entitled they feel to keep doing it. Seek advice from support services. There are stalking helplines and advice centres in most countries now. Seek them out. Register your case with them, because these services keep records of cases and the histories behind each case. You need to keep a journal of everything that's going on. You need to note down every single thing that happens, like wherever they turn up, if they show up, or any kind of strange parcels, supposed gifts arriving to your house. It all needs to be documented alongside the date that it happened, so that in the future, if you ever need to approach this from a legal standpoint, you have a strong documented history of everything that's gone on. Also, don't become complacent. These people are sinister people. You need to stay vigilant. They're volatile and they're unhinged. Be aware of your surroundings and who's around you. You can't afford to let your guard down. Invest in home security systems. Take self-defense classes. Do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel safe and protected. Okay, so I hope this video has been useful to you. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. You can also hit the notification bell and the subscribe button for future content. Thanks for watching.